This is Building Bridges with Michael Hershman.
Hi, I'm Michael Hershman, and welcome to Building Bridges, that which unites us, a candid conversation about culture, about democracy, and finding common ground. Today, I'm honored to have a friend, a colleague from North Carolina, Rufus Edmisten, the former two-term Attorney General of North Carolina, the former Secretary of State. But I knew Rufus when he was the Deputy General Counsel for the Senate Watergate Committee. That's the granddaddy of all Senate investigations in the history of our country. Welcome, Rufus. Rufus, is it true you were born in a log cabin in Boone, North Carolina?
Well, the truth is Boone, and yes, a sort of log cabin, because when my father and mother came to take over that cabin in the early 30s, it had been a log cabin, and over the years, my father refurbished it and built over the old logs, and it actually was a log cabin. But I don't have a middle name, Abe. I think I mentioned you one time in our past of 52 years, believe it or not, Michael, knowing one another, that one of my names, Rufus, was one grandfather, and Lige, Lige, was the other grandfather, and they tacked those two names onto this perfectly pretty little baby boy, and I've had to live with it ever since. But I've often said that the way you remember my name is Rufus spelled backwards is suffer, S-U-F-U-R.
And speaking about remembering names, you made your name in politics, and we're going to talk about that. But the thing that I always remembered about you is you have this unique ability to remember everyone's name and face. How do you do that?
Well, Michael, it's a matter of listening. If you notice, when people are introduced them to you, they normally mumble their names. Something like, did you say your name was what? And you repeat your name to me, Michael Hershman. And then I say, hello, Michael Hershman. And I have done something there to give me a little kick to remember your name. And primarily, people don't listen when another person is introduced to them. So it's the fault of the person who's supposed to be listening and the one who's saying their name. So it's just a little trick over the years. And sometimes I don't remember, but most of the time I do, because it's a matter of paying attention to what somebody says their name is.
Well, I imagine that comes in handy in politics.
Well, absolutely. I think I'm the last retail politician in North Carolina. When I ran for governor in 1984, I stood at factory gates. If there were 5 people gathered, I tried to gather around them. It hurts me now, Michael, to think about the state of our political system today. All about money, all about raising funds. No one wants to go places and shake hands and look somebody in the eye. They want to do fundraising. And that to me is taking away the real spirit of a campaign. And I used to enjoy campaigning. I would not now, because all they'd want me to be doing, Michael, would be put on a set of headphones and get on the phone and beg people for money. That's not my way of campaigning.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're not going to be asking me for a contribution today, because as we both know, I think you're done with politics. But since you brought up the governor's campaign, we know how successful you were in North Carolina, serving several terms as Attorney General, Secretary of State. I read your book. It's called That's Rufus. And in the book, I think you mentioned that you may have lost that race for governor because you desecrated North Carolina barbecue. Is that correct?
Oh my, you would pick that out. If you're a North Carolinian, you live barbecue and you're in politics. Well, you've got distinct different barbecue areas of the state. Eastern barbecue is Frederica based. You've got the middle that is mostly pork shoulder, and the Western is just not much barbecue at all. And one time, after having eaten barbecue 3 times a day for 6 months, I was at a gathering and somebody said, have you eaten enough barbecue, Mr. Edmisten? I said, I've eaten so much of that, I'm sick and tired of it. I hope I never see another bite as long as I live. My God, Michael, you would have thought I said I hate my mother. You would have thought I said I hate chocolate cake, apple pie. Next day, the News Observer, the local paper, said Edmiston attacks barbecue. And I went into a full apology mode. I said, I apologize for my reckless remarks. And I said, I've gone to an exorcist and been exorcised of those demonic things I said about barbecue. And I will never do it again, I promise, as long as I live. And so now every barbecue book you pick up, go to the index, look at it, look at my name, and they'll say there was this guy named Edmiston who attacked barbecue, and guess what? He didn't become governor. It's been fun. It's been so much fun. Of course, it was a joke, but that's one thing people still remember because they pick up little quirky things like that. I'm back on barbecue. I love it.
Well, glad to hear that you're back on barbecue. But look, um, you grew up in a log cabin, as we said. I think you were on a farm, if I'm not mistaken, in the mountains of North Carolina. What did you want to be when you were a young boy?
Well, Michael, when I grew up, it was hard work on the farm. I milked cows at 5:30 in the morning. And I always wanted to become an agriculture person. I wanted to become a vet. I thought that'd be the greatest thing in the world. And I was determined to do that. And then I got off one time on a thing called the Moorhead Scholarship application and made the finals to Chapel Hill and got down to Chapel Hill and liked the place. And thereupon, everything changed. I no longer wanted to go back to the farm. I love Chapel Hill. I'm on the board of visitors there now and love it. But my original notion was to be an agriculture agent or a veterinarian. And I figured it this way, that sometimes I wish I had followed that advocation because cows and horses only kick you because you get in the way. They don't have a mean bone in their bodies unless you make them that way. Human beings are quite often different.
Well, it's interesting because you followed a career path that took you to Washington, D.C., took you to the United States Senate, where you were a staffer for many years. But because you grew up on a farm, you have work ethic. And I know for a fact that while you were working hard every single day in the U.S. Senate, you also went to law school at night. Where did you get the energy to do all that?
Michael, it was difficult to do because to work 5 days a week, go to law school 5 nights a week, it was discipline. And I remember saying that someday somebody will pay for all that misery and suffering. And for 28 years, the taxpayers and citizens did. But it was just something I wanted to achieve. And I had the blessing of the most wonderful man that I've idolized all these years, and you know about whom I'm going to say, Senator Sam Ervin. He thought it was very good that I was in law school. But I've often said that I learned more as his driver in those early years than I did in all of law school. How lucky I was. I sometimes had to miss law school at nighttime to drive the senator around, but I was so happy to do that because he knew the Constitution backwards and forwards. He could tell you what page a case came on in the books. So I was very blessed. Michael, I've always, coming from a large family, 5 boys and 1 girl, my mother and father taught us to thank those who helped you get where you are. And that's been one of the axioms in my life. Senator Ervin was just so wonderful to me and helped me get where I've been and what I've done. And I believe that in these days of incivility, if people would stop and think, did I remember to thank that person who helped me get where I am today? If not, do it, then thank them again.
I'm not sure that we have many folks like Senator Ervin today in politics. He was a true Southern gentleman and a strict constitutionalist. And he believed in people and he believed in unity. It's hard to find these days in politics.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you think of it, Michael, in your role on the Watergate Committee, you saw every day Senator Ervin, a Democrat from North Carolina, Howard Baker, Senator Howard Baker, a Republican from Tennessee. They worked like a beautiful team of horses. They were together. As you recall, they never disagreed in public. They made an agreement from the very beginning that we are going to have a hearing where people will not see people bickering and carrying on like they do today. They worked out things behind the scenes. And as I've often said, I don't remember any vote coming out of that Watergate committee that was not unanimous. And can you imagine something like that today? Heavens no, it would never occur. So they were such a great example. And you think of your work on the committee. Here you're a young guy in your mid-20s. You come into Washington, and I don't know whether you had investigative experience or not, but you were given great authority as a young guy by the works of Senator Ervin to go do it because he trusted people. And he didn't have to touch everything himself. He delegated, and I think that's a great part of leadership, learning how to delegate. And it's so hard for so many people to delegate because they think, I am the only one that can do that. Not so.
Well, now, you talk about my youth. You weren't exactly old folk at that time. You were just a few years older. And here you were, the Deputy Chief Counsel of the Senate Watergate Committee. Tell me a little about the way the committee was organized, because it didn't exist before it was instituted.
Yeah, well, Michael, as you know, on Capitol Hill, the two most important things are your space and parking spaces, believe it or not. And I had been on Capitol Hill for almost 10 years prior to Watergate. I knew the ins and outs of how things work there. And that's why Senator Ervin asked me to be the Deputy Chief Counsel of the Watergate Committee. And, our friend Sam Dash was the Chief Counsel, who should have been, did a great job. But when we started out with the Watergate Committee, you have no space. You have nothing except a Senate resolution that says you exist. You've got to go find space. I remember walking around looking. Well, first of all, I gave up my space. I had a nice office we called it the new Senate office building at that time, which is now called not the Dirksen building, but the other building. And I gave up my desk, my chair for Sam Dash, and then I had to go find space otherwise. And as you know, putting together 100+ committee is very difficult to do. We were in a time crunch. We had an unending resolution, one of the few I've ever heard of, where we had no limit on our budget. I remember going with Senator Ervin looking for space in the Senate office building, and we came up on the Senate auditorium. And I made a stupid remark. I said, well, we could take this over, couldn't we? And I remember Bill Cochran, who was Chief Counsel of the Senate Rules Committee, said, are you nuts? I said, no. And Senator Ervin talked to Senator Jordan of North Carolina, chairman of the Rules Committee, and we took over the Senate auditorium. And as you know, we built a huge platform that went out over the entire thing, leveling it so that it wouldn't be downhill to kick people off the end where your offices were. And that's how we got space. No, I don't think any committee on Capitol Hill has ever been formed that quickly with that many people, which exceeded 100 people, Michael, of investigators, clerical people, and everybody. We got along. You take. We mentioned Senator Ervin and Senator Baker. Well, my relationship with Fred Thompson, the Deputy Minority Counsel, we worked together because we knew that we had to do that because our bosses demanded it. And today, I have a little story one time about my friend Senator Joe Manchin. He served when I was Secretary of State of North Carolina. He was Secretary of State of Virginia, West Virginia, and became a U.S. Senator. And I went to see him one time and I said, well, Senator, how you like it here? He said, I can't stand the place. He said, I was governor of West Virginia, attorney general. I had some, and secretary of state. I could get things done. He said, I don't know anybody here. The only time we see one another is when we walk from our offices and get on the subway to go vote on something. You say hello to somebody. It shows you how dysfunctional it is today. And it's a far cry from when I was there from 64 to 74, when there was an unwritten rule that you be decent. That it's better to, I use it this way, it's better to be kind than to be right all the time.
Now, Rufus, you had either the honor or the challenge of serving a subpoena on the then president of the United States. First time in history, and in fact, I think it still remains the first time.
Well,
what's that like?
Well, Michael, real quickly, as you know, John Dean came and said that the president was into it up to his neck. And the White House said he's a liar, he's not. And then our dear friend, one of your compatriots and my wonderful friend, Gene Boyce of North Carolina, convened an executive session, which for the lawyers in the room and you never ask a question of somebody unless you know what the answer is going to be. If you do, you're very stupid. So Gene elicited through his good work that there was a taping system in the White House. That was the biggest news we had in Watergate up to that time that I can dream of. And the notion came, okay, if there's a taping system, we'll find out if President Nixon was part of the cover-up. And so once we discovered the tapes, the committee voted again unanimously, Michael, to subpoena the Watergate tapes. And well, I chose myself to take that because, very frankly, I did not know the import at that time. I had no idea it was the first time in history that a committee of the Congress had subpoenaed the president. And took it down there, and I can recall it very distinctly. Hot day in August 1973, and I delivered it, and I read every word of it. And while I was at it, I did a little mischievous thing. I had one of those little pocket constitutions, and I whipped it out of my pocket, and I said, I've heard it said that you guys need one of these down here also. And I gave it to Leonard Garment, his counsel of the day, and they had a good chuckle over it. So yes, I have given those subpoenas to the University of North Carolina, and you've been in my office many, many times, and you've seen the replica of them, and I have quite a little Watergate museum here, and I bet you've got one too somewhere.
Well, we all have our memories, but I want to fast forward because I understand now, Rufus, that you're writing a book on civility.
Yes.
Is it too late? Are we too divided? Are we too angry at this point? Or can we ever bring back some sort of sense of civility in politics and in society?
Yeah, because of our loudmouth people on the left and the right, both of them equally, in my opinion, obnoxious. People have got at one another's throats, talking gibberish, talking hateful stuff. And we have a lack of civility, the likes of which I never dreamed we would experience. And I've decided that I will try to take some things from my past, like the Senator Irvin, Senator Baker, like our committee work. Michael, you know that we never had any big fusses or nobody called anybody anything. I never asked anybody on that committee, as you well know, when I helped hire them, whether they were a Democrat or Republican, didn't care. And today's people seem to want to validate their own views by sticking with only the people that make them feel like they're right. And I think I interviewed my friend Connie Chung the other day. You remember her so well. And she is very alarmed, like I am, at the lack of civility. I have a letter into my friend Bill Clinton. I want to talk to him. I want to talk also to the Republican governor who beat me, Jim Martin. And I believe, Michael, to answer your question, that yes, there is, if people will just stop and listen to one another. The first thing about civility is listening to the other side. You asked about my ability to remember people's names. Number one was listening. And even if you think somebody is as wrong as day from dark, if you'll just give a little time to listen and say, well, you might have something there. You might be amazed that people, if you let them talk, you validated that they're a human being. And I don't think it's too late. I think so many things, computers, AI is going to add to that problem. Even talking about having AI companions now and things like that, which I think just god awful. I don't think it's too late. And I want to gather stories up of people that have fought for civility and find it easier to do than to be the other way. I don't want my blood pressure rising any more than it does. The best way to get a heart attack is to keep shouting and carrying on and trying to disrespect somebody. I think there is, I hope I can get the book done by the end of the year. And I believe that people are yearning for something like that. They all tell me they do, Michael. And no, I don't think it's too late.
So the Tar Heel state, North Carolina, is referred to as a Tar Heel state. Tar Heel refers back to something during the Civil War. Is that correct?
That's correct. They have said at the Battle of Appomattox that the North Carolina soldiers dug in and kept fighting so hard that we were a state known for its tar pitch out of pine trees, tar pitch. And they got named the Tar Heels because they said that they stood so tall and so solid that they became Tar Heels. And so I hope that nobody's offended that it's a Civil War reference, because it's just a very firm goodness of North Carolina that we're the Tar Heel state.
Well, look, did you ever think throughout your career up until now that you would actually ever hear folks in our country talking about the potential of another civil war here?
Oh, Michael, I have seen that and my heart just breaks. What kind of the all encompassing form of dialogue today is I am right and you are wrong and I'm not budging. And I hear talk of a civil war. What do you mean? Good gracious alive. We spent all these years trying to keep America together. And I think right now, Michael, we're as close to as far apart in this country as we almost were in the Civil War days. I know there were other days, but I've read a lot of history, heard a lot of historical pundits. I believe we're at one of those crossroads right now when good people have to say enough of this stuff is enough. If you're going to tear down somebody, don't come around me because I'm not going to participate in it. I think that's a great way to do things.
Now, Rufus, I suspect you, like I, have always held a great deal of respect for the office of the president.
I do.
But it seems like the office has diminished in different ways. Can we bring that sense of respect back?
Michael, not until we adhere to the greatest principle of the founding fathers, the separation of powers. Now, when you were in Washington with Watergate, Congress was sticking up to its prerogatives. It said, and it said, we will not allow the president to impound funds. That means not spend funds that Congress said spend. We will not allow the president to do pocket vetoes. We will not allow the president to run wild with executive orders. Congress was standing up for its prerogatives. Right now, the Congress of the United States is a lapdog. It's genuflecting to the executive branch now. The separation of powers is extremely important. And every president I've known, Michael, since I can remember the Eisenhower days almost. They test executive powers, but there's always been a check somewhere by the Congress or the courts. There seems to be an obliteration of the checks and balance system today that's causing a rampant runaway executive branch that doesn't want anybody else in its way. Very alarming to me, very alarming. And I don't have any solution to undo that, except that the institutions we have, the judiciary and the legislature, stand up for their prerogatives and their demands. The Constitution doesn't say you might do it. It says you shall be separate and apart and have your own duties and wishes. And we've lost that. We've lost any kind of semblance of separation of powers. And that's why the executive branch is like Caesar on what meat does our Caesar feed, that he's grown so great?
So as a bit of a counterpoint here, Rufus, the people of this country elected a strong leader because they felt in some ways that Washington had failed them. Washington, you actually referred to the change in politics, and politics being all about money these days. Is it more about money these days than helping the constituents? Are people fed up with professional politicians, those that are there to simply stay in office and to gain their own power?
Michael, I believe that I have to use Senator Ervin as an example. After Watergate, he could have run again. He was very popular. He said, I knew when to quit because I'd had enough power. We're veering over from money-centric politics now to power. Power. Who's got the most power? Who can get retribution for some perceived wrong in the past? And it's very chilling to a guy like me who grew up believing that the Constitution was a sacred document. And I think it's hard nowadays to find authentic political figures because of the 10-second soundbite. AI is coming along. This is so ironic, Michael. Senator Ervin used to say to me 50 some years ago, well, one day we might even going to run a computer for president. We're almost there. We're almost there. And isn't that prophetic that Senator Ervin would have said that? And he didn't believe in lie detector tests. He didn't believe in computers. And said that pretty soon we'd elect one as president. Well, we're getting close to that.
Well, look, running for office has become a combat sport. Who wants to expose themselves through social media? Time is dead. Distance is moot. Everything becomes public now. There's no holding back. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misleading facts that are hard to overcome because of social media and because the news changes so fast. Who would even want to run for office today?
Well, Michael, I have person after person come to me and say, I'm afraid to run for public office. Now, I teach a course called the Institute of Political Leadership. Twice, we just had a meeting the other day, and there's some fine leaders, members of the legislature, a couple of judges and all, and we go through a rigorous training thing. I said, if you don't like people, don't get involved in politics. If you do get involved in politics, avoid hubris. Hubris, the old Greek word that means get puffed up, believe that nobody's watching what you do, that you're all knowing. I said, avoid hubris. And I'm proud that these young people that I have helped teach are doing well, but We just had a U.S. Senator, Tom Tillis, that you just read about, I'm sure, heard on TV, has said, "I'm not running again." I I I know him very well, and he's Republican. I'm a traditional Democrat. I'm sure that he didn't want to have to put up with the unbelievable assault that would come his way if he ran again. And I must say, I can't blame people for not wanting to be in public office. And if you recall one time in Watergate, and you can help me remember what it was, somebody appeared before the committee, a young man, and he said, "I advise people to not get involved in political life or governmental work." And it offended Senator Ervin. I'm trying to think who it was, Michael, off the top of my head. Ervin said it before all millions of Americans. Was it Sloan or someone like that?
I don't recall, but it could have been Sloan. In fact, I think it was Sloan.
Ervin thought that was one of the shoddiest things to say, because what we do need are people in political life. And believe it or not, I think more people are honest, more people are dedicated than not. Our government would crumble, Michael. So, but I do find it very hard for someone, unless you're squeaky clean. If you're squeaky clean, I don't want to vote for you, because you'll make too much noise.
Isn't it interesting, Rufus, how everything seems to be cyclical? How back then during Watergate, it was about the rule of law. And here now, so many years afterwards, we're having the same debate about the rule of law, how important it is, and what it means.
Michael, we've come full circle. I gave a speech the other day, and they wanted to know what about today? Well, we had all the Watergate reforms. As you know, they've all been knocked down one way or another. The money thing's gone. Federal Election Commission is a joke. And now we're full cycle back again with claims that executive power is unlimited, with people at one another's throats, dirty tricks, some of which you investigated. We're back where we were. How's that come about? But unfortunately, I think it's true.
Well, I think you asked a good question. How does it come about? We moved away over the years, I don't know why, from teaching civics and civility in our public schools. And if you don't pay attention to civics and you don't pay attention to history, then history is bound to repeat itself.
Michael, you couldn't be any more right. I don't think there's not civics required now in our schools. I would guarantee you that there's not 1% of 16-year-old kids in any state that can name any one of their two U.S. senators. We need to install civics again, and that's one way of bringing back civility. And that's one thing I'm going to recommend highly in my book, that we teach civics. And it's got to be careful how we do it. Not indoctrination, just how's this government supposed to work? What does the separation of powers mean? What are checks and balances? That's the trouble with too much computer stuff now. I'm for one taking computers away, cell phones in schools, Michael. You can't be sitting here like this the whole time and absorbing any kind of learning if you're up and down, looking at your cell phone. You can't. So I'm all for that.
Let me ask you a question. Maybe this is a bit awkward, but North Carolina has become a very popular destination for people that are moving out of other states, and in particular, northeastern states. What do you think about all those Yankees coming down North Carolina? Are they changing the culture?
No, not really. not really. And we love people to come to North Carolina. Now, I happen to know a Yankee fellow that lives in Western North Carolina, my neck of the woods. And I think he and his lovely wife are pretty decent people. And if you recall, Michael, you and our friend Mr. Stephen Leopold, a Canadian that I named the Chinook, were adopted by us North Carolinians. And anytime we've ever had a reunion for 52 years, you and Brother Leopold have been part of this. And North Carolina is, I don't know whether you've told your audience or not, you're coming up on 80 years old, and I'm coming to your birthday because that's going to be something else. But we're glad to have people like Michael Hershman and his lovely wife.
Well, it's Rufus, it's at our age, it's good to see anyone, but it's particularly good to see you and to hear about your book on civility, which I think is going to hopefully help drive us to a better place, because I do worry about this country. We have a very important birthday coming up. It's not my birthday. It's the 250-year birthday of the United States, and that's next year.
Yes.
When our founding fathers wrote the Declaration of Independence almost 250 years ago, they talked about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, the very word democracy has become politicized. But those underlying principles are something we can never afford to lose.
Michael, I've gone back and I've read some of the great authors leading up to the Declaration of Independence, little short excerpts. And those are everlasting truths that we have to live by if we're going to have a democracy in this country. And I think teaching civics is another good way to remind people of that. People don't read enough today, by the way. And I've rambled off with all these wonderful minutes with you, Michael. And let me pay you some from the heart gratitude. You have always been a person who was thankful for what you have. I was honored to have your dear brother work with me when I was Secretary of State. And you're doing this podcast, taking out of your very busy worldwide operation to do it. It shows me that you care about our country and that you believe in those principles that were laid down 250 years ago. And you'll be at that until the day you die.
I appreciate those kind words. You know, I read a survey the other day, Rufus, that surveyed young people in our country, and 38% of those people said they didn't think patriotism was important. Now, I know our ancestors would be rolling over in their graves if they heard that. I think it's time for people to pay more attention to the positive in this country than the negatives. And we do have negatives. There's no country's perfect. It was Churchill that said, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others.
Yes, yes.
And we'll never realize in this country perfection. But I maintain, and I've traveled to over 140 countries in my lifetime, I maintain that our form of government is the fairest, the most honest, most transparent, and the one that is best for human beings.
Michael, I think you're so right. So right.
Well, Rufus, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. And we're going to continue to have our conversations because you and I keep in touch with one another. But I thank you for taking time out of your day today to join us here on Building Bridges, that which unites us.
I have thoroughly enjoyed myself and appreciate you and your dedication to our country, Michael.
Thank you. As we close today's episode of Building Bridges, that which unites us, I'm reminded about how powerful public service can be, particularly when it's rooted in empathy and in policy and civility.
This is Building Bridges with Michael Hershman.